Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric, this being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 3 of Leverage Redemption. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this episode is the continuation of, the team kind of getting adjusted to the new dynamic, and that is having Brianna be the hacker of the team. Obviously, she wants to kind of learn a little bit of everything from everybody. So, Parker shows up with that outfit with all the bells. And at first, I'm like, I didn't get what that was all about. Because, once again, we're dealing with Parker here. So, Parker can be a bit of a weirdo. So, I thought maybe there was... But it's no, there was actually legitimate reasons for it. Besides, also, we've seen it over the course of the original show, how much she's grown. And yes, even in this show so far, she's still a little bit of a weirdo, but at the same time, she's kind of normalized, at least to a certain extent. So the fact of the matter is, it's her teaching Brianna how to be. It's oh, gotcha, sucker, you're going to jail for a long time. It's I'm actually an undercover cop, and it's kind of saying Brianna being that's not realistic or whatever. It's Hardison got to go out of the van, and it's well, if you're not able to do all this, I guess you're just going to be stuck doing stuff in the van, and that's not what Brianna wants. It's Hardison got out of the van. It's no, it took a long time for Elliot to let Hardison out of the van, and it's even this kind of beautiful moment of her being I still worry about him, and I'm oh, that's sweet. And I also love the whole thing with Brianna's why is my hand numb? It's oh yeah, there's numbing cream on these bells. It's meant to be a lesson, it's I gotta, the only way you're going to get better is if you have to have some consequences to it. And then eventually the numbness goes to her arm, and then eventually her legs. What I also thought was interesting, and this kind of goes a little bit to a point that I brought up previously, Parker's kind of the one who took over the operations, and she's kind of been the mastermind of things. We've just never really seen her fully do that. She hasn't really, I'm sure she has a very different style than Nate's, but she hasn't really done her Nate style. At least we haven't seen it. The closest we got to that was at the very end when she, was doing the thing of, we provide leverage, which I'll get to that in a second. But I love the fact is that, it's just this moment where, Sophie's oh, I'm going to go meet with the client. Parker's no, wait for me. She's no, you're busy. And it's because for Parker, she's the one that's been meeting with the clients, ever since she took over things. And it's right, so once again, Sophie's there kind of doing that. So it definitely feels like Sophie's kind of slid more in, the mastermind role to a certain extent. It feels like it, doesn't it? And I feel Parker's a little upset by it and stuff like that. It's that's my job, and she's doing the whole thing with her hand and just kind of be and obviously, Brianna's oh, this sucks, huh? And just kind of being allocated to the one specific thing, oh, this is kind of your thing, and you just kind of get pushed aside. But also we got our first I didn't know they were actually they kind of, I guess, we didn't get it episode 1 and 2, but we got it episode 3 is, an actual, title, intro, opening, and stuff like that, which I'm it just, obviously it makes you miss the original one from, 2. It's actually interesting that you go back and, only season, well, obviously I knew season 1 didn't have it. I didn't remember season 5 didn't have it either. Only seasons 2 through 4 have the intro, 5 is, 1 where it just goes leverage. That's all it says. But it's oh, it's just... But, this one's interesting. It's going to take some getting used to because the first one's just so catchy. Sometimes bad guys make the best good guys. We provide leverage. It's so iconic. That's always so... And then, literally watching it every once again, every episode from season 2 to 4, it gets stuck in your head. And to be oh, here we are with a different one. It's hey, it's a new show. You got to do something different. But I do appreciate it's a very espionage, almost James Bond-esque, opening. It kind of reminds, it's not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Whiskey Cavalier opening, because that kind of has that same international spy type of aspect to it. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. But I also love that Brianna isn't on top of things. It's not she's kind of got that cockiness her bro does, but it is a thing of right, she's not on top of things, because later on it's the case they end up getting is that this dude his name is Chaudhry. He's a former congressman, is basically buying up houses. He's basically finding loopholes, and they're faking information so that people will end up losing their houses. Because it's right, it's not just the grandmother and her I think it's her granddaughter. It's oh yeah, her granddaughter's gonna have a sweet 16 soon, but it's it's not just them, it's like houses in that area, because it turns out this dude is, interestingly enough, very Ozark-esque, where it's like, oh, he's got like a ship gambling on the lake and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, apparently, like, the actor who plays Dennis, I didn't remember, but apparently he's in Ozark, and I was like, I don't remember. It said, like, specifically what, like, season 2, episode 2. I'm like, I don't remember. But I was like, yeah, like, that's, like, I mean, that's specifically the plot of season 2 of Ozark, like, it's getting, like, that whole thing started, like, the whole gambling on the boat thing. I was like, oh, that's interesting parallels. I mean, you know, that is in, like, the Ozarks, and that's in is that in Missouri, or is that Louisiana? No, whatever the case may be, I'm going on a whole tangent. It made me think of that. But I love that she was only able to find out, oh yeah, like, this thing only exists on paper, and it's like, and she's like, what do you mean? And you told me to look for the money, and I found this. It's like, no, when we usually tell Hardison to look for the money, he ends up finding all, like, it's like, no, like, you didn't, like, I just told you to look for the money. It's like, no, like, I meant to go deeper. And, like, even later on, Elliot's like, the fact of the matter is, like, normally, like, I gotta fill out this application. She's like, usually Hardison will have gotten me the job, even got me a 401k, you know? I love that. Because I love the whole thing where Brianna was like, yeah, I read the manual, because, like, cloning the phone, like, didn't, like, it was like, yeah, she's like, yeah, it's kind of a little hard. She's like, you know, it's like, I got it, like, you know, I read the manual, and she's like, all right, I skimmed it, and then it's like, all right, I skimmed like 3 volumes, and then you have like Parker be like, it's 15, so it's like you've only read like a third of it, a fifth. I'm being stupid. Because I also love the whole thing of, like, right, like, all this basic information, like, what you found, Harry could have found. He's like, well, I am oh, I get it, I'm the low bar. Okay. Once again, still getting his, you know, it's like his newbie licks from all of this. But also, this was also, like, him being there with the first client meeting, which, you know, as a lawyer, it's not his first time in that position. He's just like, whoa, I'm just on the opposite side of the table I normally am. Because at first, he's like, right, we're going to get you money. But they're like, we don't want money. And it's like, right. He's like, you want your house. That's a very important thing, very important lesson to learn early on, because that is something that kind of we saw in the original show too. It's like, that can be something you lose along the way of, like, right, you get so busy trying to stop just a bad guy, you don't pay attention to what the client wants. You just assume as a lawyer, he's like, oh, obviously you want money. It's like, no, you want this house. This house has sentimental value. It's been there since like the early 1900s. It's been kind of passed down in that family, so that's what matters the most, you know. So I also love the whole thing of Brianna stealing. It's like, you know, Harry's like, where's my, I had that flash drive, and Brianna was like, oh, you're looking for somebody stole something from you? Yeah, it's got, she's like, wait, where did it? And then Parker has it. She's like, what? How did you do that? And it's like, I'm Parker. And it's like, that's all you need in this. It's like, how did you do that? I'm Parker. Right. It's Parker. It's what she does. She's like the best, you know? So I love it. But I also love, like, there's even that moment when Sophie's like climbing up, you know, to make an announcement in front of the screen. And as she's getting on top of it, she's like, oh, like the actress inside her kind of kicked in, and she kind of like says it like a certain way. And Parker was like, no. She's like, no. And it's like, mm-mm. It's like, okay. And I'm just going to say it the normal way. I also love, we got some interesting insight to Parker, where it's like, you know, Sophie's she's like, I know you've done, like, you know, you were already grifting, like, when we were doing our thing back in the day, but even then, you've kind of taken over that and everything. I get that, but the Southern Belle Con is pretty hard. It's like, but basically, her and Hardison have a system where it's like, basically, they work out, like, right, if someone says this, you say this. Like, they basically create a flow chart of it. And she's like, there's no way you can, and she's like, honestly, this one's actually pretty good. And it's like, right, if someone says this, you do this. This is how you know, anytime you want to get out of conversation, you bring up bodily functions and stuff like that. Or like, you want to get out of something, like you feign an injury, and then like Sophie's like, Parker, do you use this with every interaction you have? And then she starts choking. She's like, yes, you're right. And I'm like, that is a very Parker thing. Like, right, like, and I think that's kind of neat to know, like, right, it's a lifelong process of, like, she's grown up she spent most of her life being kind of an oddball, like, not being the most well-adjusted human being, and, like, you know, just being her Parker self and her Parkerisms. And it's like, yeah, like, even, like, 12 total years, the 8 years in between the shows, but even the 5 years working with OG Team Leverage, it's like, that's still not going to be something to, like, obviously she still had that even throughout the entirety of the show. Like I said, she's worked around those quirks, and then she's not as like oddball as she was, but it's still there. But she killed that Southern Belle situation, and I love how she put like especially like leaning into it, like Chaudhry, because the whole point is like for her to feel like she's meant to be like, oh, because he's trying to get a gaming license and you want to make him feel like there's competition for it. And she kind of like spanked him during that whole situation, that conversation. It's like, oh, like my family, like we've been here since France and you haven't. So go ahead. Like, and obviously disrespecting him because he keeps being like, oh, Congressman Chaudhry. And it's like, oh, Mr. They keep referring to him as Mr. You know, because he's trying to hold on, because he's not a congressman anymore, but he's a former congressman. So I thought there's just kind of an interesting thing of like, right, that her playing in that role. Also, when they were initially getting information before finding out Chaudhry was behind all this, Sophie and Harry going into it a little bit about like obviously him, you know, playing up the like it's like she's trying to like, obviously Sophie kind of led it, and then he kind of played his own part, and even Sophie's kind of like, okay, you were kind of manic, but he's like, no, you said play to like something real. And I'm like, because he was like, how deep did your background check on me go? Because I think I forgot to bring it up last episode, but yeah, like he revealed he does have a daughter. So I mean, so there's that, and I'm assuming like because of that conversation, the context of that, like trying to catch that dude off guard like that, it's like, right, so he must be divorced too. Because I think he said like Isla as a name, and I'm like, oh, is that supposed to be like your ex-wife's name or something like that? So once again, the interesting parallels they're drawing to like Nate. I'm sure it's a very different reason, but the fact is that he was talking about like, oh, like I worked myself to the bone to provide, and it's like basically it seems like that was his issue maybe in his marriage, where it's like, right, he was too busy working all the time, and so things kind of fell apart in that regard. So Elliot being getting his job working with Dennis, I love that whole I love that whole dynamic this episode. Elliot ends up having a lot of interesting relationships. Like he builds a lot of interesting bonds with people over the course of like some of these cons and stuff. And I love the fact is that it's like, right, he sees that the guy has like a police car and like motto, and it's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I am. You're looking for a renegade, and it's like, that's me. It's like, I'm from this particular area. It's like I was after this particular area strangler. It's like, yeah. It took a lot, but, you know, I might have lost my badge, but he lost a lot more. I'm like, dude, I love it. And the guy, Dennis, is eating it up. He's like, really? He's got spreadsheets on people and stuff like that. He's even, like, made a cake, and it's like, oh, is this lemon juice? I'm like, yeah, obviously, like, Elliot being the connoisseur of food and stuff like that, it makes sense. But I like that there's definitely, like, a bond created between them. There's that element. There's even the whole situation of like, you know, obviously the whole point of all of this is trying to get Chaudhry to lose his license because obviously it's like, you know, Brianna thinks she's kind of got things figured out, like, right, we just get him on a misdemeanor, but obviously he has high enough power people to kind of like, when all this bribery stuff came up in the past, he was able to kind of make it disappear. So same thing for a misdemeanor. So the whole point is to basically scam him out of money, like when it's time for someone to get a payout at the casino, if he doesn't have the money, he'll end up losing his license in that regard. So they're hoping to kind of strike him down and that kind of put a stop to his deal, because Sophie spends time with him and ultimately ends up finding out, like, right, he has bigger plans, that it's not just the houses he's got already, that he plans to expand upon it and make, like, bulldoze down a whole bunch of other people's houses and make it like essentially a casino parking lot. Because that was interesting too, like basically the boat stuff, like, used to have to just drive on the lake to be able to, that'd be, like, enough, but now it's, like, because of the laws have changed, you can also, like, drag, like, land-based stuff into it as well, so that's why he's trying to expand on land. Something else I thought was kind of interesting about this case that I never really thought about until, like, now, I'm glad, like, once again, another element of rewatching it. Social media played a part in the original show, but like social media wasn't it was its own behemoth back then, but it's way more of a, social media is a whole other beast in its own right. Because even Chaudhry's like, why what do I have to do to get verified? Like, that was such an interesting line, because I also thought about it, like, right, I think Twitter's been around since maybe 2010, 2001. I feel like 2011 is when it went up, but I don't know. Like, obviously, but it's interesting because, like, that was never really something that was really showcased in the original show. I mean, to be fair, Brianna's the one that's like, right, I am like the more social media savvy person, so it makes sense. It's a new generation, stuff like that. But once again, like, Twitter is like a much bigger behemoth than it was back then. So, like, they use social media in later parts of the show. But once again, it's like, yeah, like the final season was like 2012, maybe 2011 to 2012. So, like, of course, it'd be a situation of like, yeah, of course, it just showcases, like, right, the changing of the times, like, even in that regard of just, like, right, like, they'd showcase, like, oh, here's Parker's, the Southern Belle, like, character she's playing, on Twitter and stuff like that. That, like I said, they focus on that to show you, like, right, that's, because it's a big part of everyday life now, so it's just interesting little details like that I find fascinating. I also love the fact is that, for whatever reason, Brianna was like, oh, there's a pearl. Let me grab it. Let me get it. It's like, no. Literally, everyone's telling her not to do it, and she went for it anyway because she's like, nah, I got that thing off of Harry. It's like, no, but you still got caught anyway. And she ultimately ends up getting caught, but luckily, Elliot was kind of able to bail her out of it. But it's like, right, because you got caught, we're going to have to keep you. You're just going to have to stay in the van. And obviously she has the whole conversation with Harry where it's like, right, you kind of get to sip, like, the drinks and stuff like that. You get to do more. And Harry's like, obviously I had to leave this life behind. But she's like, yeah, you're still wealthy and just this and that, It comes from a position of, she says, like, the reason why she's doing all this is because she thinks the world sucks. And she wants to be able to make it suck less. And it's like, yeah, the only reason why she's mainly here is like, yeah, like this whole operation, what they're doing, like, she's like, yeah, they say that they're going to do all that, like they're helping people, which is cool and fine and dandy. And it's like, the main reason why I'm here is because I love my brother and I'm desperate. Because she thinks that this team is like, right, they say they can do good, that they do good. So, like, I'll kick it with them. But she's like, I don't believe in, like, hope and stupid stuff like that. But for him, it's like, right, you want to be a part of the team, then be part of the team. That's a hard lesson, like, that's also something like a hard lesson, like, everyone had to learn at one point in time. In particular, it's a hard lesson that I think Parker had to learn, like, being a part of the team, but being considerate of other people's feelings and stuff like that. That was something like, once again, they weren't always the well-oiled machine that they eventually became. There's still bumps in the road every once in a while, because once again, people's egos kind of got in the way, like, like Hardison being like, yo, I can run my own con, run my own team. That's a whole thing. Which, speaking of that, I love the whole thing of, like, Sophie, because, like, I didn't bring it up last episode, but Sophie's, like, saying, like, all right, let's do this. And then Parker's like, let's go. And she mouths the word steal. And then, you had Sophie go, like, let's go steal 20 million. It's like, right, you kind of have to do the thing. Which is actually sweet to know that, like, Parker still does that. That, like, that was kind of Nate's thing. That must mean that she still does it. And even in this episode, it's like, she's like, right, let's go steal something. And then it's like, right, you have to walk away after you do that. It's like, right. She's still, and it has to be like an homage to, like, back in the original series when she ran her own con, and she did that too. And it's like, right, so she just walked into the, like, closet, like she wanted to do the whole, like, oh, I'm walking away thing, and she walked into the closet, so that was a whole thing, so it just reminded me of that. I thought it was pretty dope. Like I say, I like that where it's just like, right, it plays like homage and just like knowing these characters so well. Once again, I had the benefit of having rewatched the show just now, the entire show. Like, now, like, a lot of those nuances that are like little bits like that, like, it's like, right, like, Sophie's still not in this realm of like doing things that way, because she hasn't done that in a long time either, so it makes sense. And even when she did do it, she still kind of did it wrong the one time she was running a con herself, So yeah, like, the plan was like to strap a whole bunch of money to Parker so she could get away. But once again, Sophie having a reminder is like, right, you have to cut her a little slack. Like, you had to learn things. We all had to kind of learn how to operate, because they were all used to working alone. And it's like, right, we are better, well-oiled machine together. We learn, we kind of help make each other and ourselves better at what we do. So, So eventually it is a situation that, Parker's going to get like the money, like, and they found a different way to strap it to herself because they basically widened the dress. But ultimately they find out in the vault it's not. It's tens of millions. And it's like, how is that? Oh, cool. So this is all about the Russian mob. And it's like, oh, cool. So he's laundering money for them. It's like, well, that complicates things, which obviously Elliot kind of does his renegade thing and kicks some ass. And I love he runs into Dennis and he's like, Dennis, these guys are a Russian mob. He's like, I knew it, my spreadsheet and everything. And Dennis took a blow to the head, and Elliot's like, you shouldn't have done it. He's like, look at me, bam, knocks the dude out. And it's like, Dennis, you okay? Just give me, gives him a thumbs up. He's like, all right, you're going to be okay. I'm like, oh, I'm glad. Once again, like, I love that at the end, like, Elliot and him are still buddies. It's like, yeah, I'll, and even at the end, he's got like an ice pack on his head. He's like, I'm telling you, they were Russian mob. I have spreadsheets. I love that. But ultimately, it's too much money to get out of there. And Brianna has an idea, and Parker trusts her. It's like, right, it's her call. And she's like, right, I trust the newbie. So it was really an interesting idea to basically seal off the room and make it, and then pressurize it so that when they do cut open the bottom, the water wouldn't come rushing in. It'd actually be pushed down. So they let the money just float away with like the safety vest and every flotation vest and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Once again, those little Parkerisms where she's just like, every time she's like stopping to smell the money, and then at one point she's like, Elliot, smell that, but also like bringing in I wonder, are those people that like are leverage international people, or are they just people that Sophie knows? Well, because they're like, right, it's like, right, when I twist my ring, that means start winning. And it's like, right, like with Nate in Budapest, it's like, sorry, couldn't make it to the funeral, Vegas prisons don't let you do that. And she's like, no, it's okay, the fact is that you're here now is all that matters. Is like, for Nate, so I thought that was pretty dope. So it's like people they knew. So I'm wondering, does it have, maybe it just has some, maybe they're just people they knew in that world. They're just like other like grifters and just kind of thieves a little bit. They're, criminals in that regard. Or maybe they're related to Leverage International, maybe not. But ultimately they were able to kind of put Chaudhry in a bad position, because now like it wasn't his money, it was Dimitri's money, and now he got called out in front of the guy that's actually an honest dude that gives out the gaming licenses. So he's kind of screwed on that department. Plus he lost Dimitri's money. So yeah, Dimitri wants a word with you. So that all went sideways, but they were able to give Lenora and her granddaughter their house back. Even got like that, as well as other houses in the neighborhood, like historic status, so no one could ever take them again. So I that was pretty, a pretty dope win at the end. And it's like, what made Parker decide to trust Brianna? It's like, right, like there's a part 10 or something, volume 10 or something of the manual is trust the person in the van. And it's like, yeah, I trust the person. Like, obviously both of them miss having Hardison around, and she's like, I know it kind of sucks that I'm here. It's like, yeah, no, it doesn't. Like, you're the hacker and you're really good at what you do. But for her, it's like she wants to do more, because like she wants to learn everything she can from everyone, because she wants to apply those skills to doing her own thing, because she wants to be able to make the world suck a little less on her own. Like, once again, I think she's with the team. She's proud to be part of the team, but I still think she looks at the team as kind of a means to an end of like, right, I'm going to learn everything I can from you guys, and I'm going to go off on my own, and I'm going to make the world suck a little less in my own way, So I think I'm interested to see where that kind of goes, whether her perspective on things kind of shift or not. I kind of realize it's just like how much good that this team can do, because like her main thing was like, right, I only want to help make sure that they're able to keep their house. Like, I, once again, doesn't really believe in this team like that. Like she believes in the stories, and she's like, oh yeah, that's fun and awesome and everything, but other than that, and also it's like, right, why she tried to steal that pearl in the first place is because she wanted, like, she idolizes Parker, so she wanted to impress Parker, so that's all it was. Interestingly enough, Parker was able to get it, and once again, it's like, wait, how did you were nowhere, I'm Parker. Once again, that's all you need to say. But I also love, you have, Parker eating the cake, and I love Elliot getting so pissed. He's like, he made it especially for me, and he walks away. And it's like both Hardison and Parker are terrible at that, because it makes me, once again, just like a little homage to, I think, like during that Office episode, that was Office from the, it was literally taking place in an office, but also that it was kind of Office, like mockumentary inspired episode. I forgot that Peter Stormare was the freaking director in that, like the director that they deal with that like had a infatuation with like Parker. I forgot that was him in this episode. I was like, freaking Peter Stormare, dude, that's nuts. I forgot like a lot of the actors that popped up in the original show. It's like wild. Because like last episode I referenced like Giancarlo Esposito. It's like that freaking Gus Fring, dude, along with a lot of other stuff. But obviously it's always that thing of like, right, there's always going to be certain characters that people will always associate with a certain actor. It's like I will always associate him with Gus Fring, or the looking, what's his name, the mirror from like the Snow White storyteller, Mirror Mirror on the Wall. I know he'd play that role in Once Upon a Time. Regardless, tangents and all that aside, like my whole point, like kind of going off on that, I went on that huge tangent. It just reminded me of like Hardison eating Elliot's sandwich from that episode. It's just all that I was bringing up, so that's what it reminded me of. So, like I said, a lot of interesting things. I'm excited to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.